Bill Wagner, legendary SID at DePauw University, now a member of the DePauw Athletic Hall of Fame. How does that hit your ears, my friend?
Well, to say it's humbling is one thing. As being somebody who's written some bios on Hall of Fame inductees here, it's you see the accomplishments. I probably suffer from some imposter syndrome. I mean, I've done is watched the events and written some stories and have not been the one out there competing. But nonetheless, it is extremely humbling, and I'm grateful.
Well, you are quite humble in this, from somebody who was there as a student while you were SID, was there as an assistant coach while you were there as an SID, was there as a head coach while you were an SID, and as an alum while you're an SID. You've been pivotal to my entire journey, and I know from all my teammates and all the athletes that I've experienced, the job you've done is worthy of Hall of Fame recognition. So thrilled that you've received that. One question I do have to ask is because in my time at DePauw, it kind of felt like you were on the committee. Did the nomination come across your desk, or was this a surprise?
Well, the nomination, I was aware of it. In fact, I had put together my own information, my bullet points of what I've done to
Right.
this point. But I will say this. I was in the meeting when the voting was conducted. I did not vote for myself. There was no way I would vote for myself. In fact, I would have assigned negative votes to everybody just to keep it from happening. But it was probably a different type of communication to the person who received it than we've had in the past. That's for sure.
And having gone through this process and been a part of it on the other side, you're around the Hall of Fame, you're all of this recognition. Um, when when you do have a chance to sit down and digest it, is this kind of a retrospect where you're looking over your entire career, or what is that next step after you process what happened?
Well, that's exactly what it is. It is a retrospect. You think about all the people that you met along the way, the relationships that you built, and of course the memories of the things you were fortunate enough to witness, and I've been lucky here. I mean, I truly have. DePauw's had not only great people, but our teams have been successful. So there's so many memories have been built, and I think as you get later in your career, you probably are. You do that anyhow. But to have an honor like this bestowed upon you, it definitely makes you think about how you got here and all the steps along the way and the great people you've met.
Well, one of the things that impressed me, and I've only seen one other guy that has done this, and that's Greg Rakestraw, is I would ask you a question on something from 15, 20 years ago, something I read. You'd have the jersey name, the date, the score, the what that player did. It was just unbelievable. And so when you look at stuff like that, you find people that are wired for certain positions perfectly. You feel wired, genetically coded to be an SID. You feel like a perfect fit for that. As you're looking at your own journey into a career, when did it come on the radar that this was something you wanted to do?
Well, I think very early on, I knew I wanted to work in sports, and that probably happened. In fact, I can specifically remember coming back from Cleveland or going to Cleveland. We're in the car, and Cleveland Indians had just hired Jeff Torborg as the manager, and he was talking about his journey and how he had gotten a master's degree in sport management at Rutgers, and I was thinking, whoa, they have a sport management degree? Well, that's interesting. And back in those days, you had to go to the library to find out any information about careers and things like that. So then in high school, I would, with my friends, would be statistician for the basketball team, sports editor for the school paper, and so I did some things along the way that I had no idea that this career existed at that moment, but I knew I wanted to work in sports. And then we used to do a game called Stratomatic, where it was a dice game. We'd play baseball games, and then you would sometimes you'd broadcast them if you were really feeling silly one day. but you keep track of the stats. You'd have to do everything manually back then. So that was those things were all kind of figured into my math interest and things like that. But then when I got to college, I went to Miami University, and I was fortunate enough to connect with Dave Young, who was the sports information director there. And I worked my last 2 years in the office, and then he suggested looking into grad school at Ohio State, and I did that, and got to work for some more Hall of Fame sports information people in that office, and then this job came open. I mean, I never envisioned college sports information. I thought I would work in pro sports. I did an internship with the Cleveland Cavaliers and ticket sales, and honestly, the Cavs were bad, and so were ticket sales at that time. So it sometimes your internships and your experiences, they make you think about things you don't want to do as well, and maybe where your skill sets lie. And so I was fortunate to get through college and through my master's degree, and then really kind of zero in on that, and knew that this was what I wanted to do.
But now take us on that journey from Ohio State to Greencastle. How did that develop?
Yeah, so I finished grad school. I finished in less than a year because I was really motivated to get. I wanted the experience of working in a sports information office, but really was anxious to get started in my career. And so I think I had interviewed at a few places, but I moved back home with my parents, and it was so that was in August, and it's getting to be November, and I had applied to a bunch of places, and things just weren't. I thought I was Division I caliber. I could be the top assistant at a SEC school, but apparently that wasn't quite where I was in my career yet. So it was right around Thanksgiving time, and I'm at home, I'm getting ready to go out with my friends, and I get a phone call, and it is Dave Graham, who was the sports information director at Albion at that time, and he was someone who I overlapped with for a year at the Ohio State University, and he called and said, "Hey, DePauw, we're playing them in basketball in a week, and they're looking for a sports information director." And I said, "Oh, that's great." And I don't know that I knew anything about DePauw except that it was one of the job openings that came up during the convention. But he gave me Pat Aikman's number. Pat was the PR director at the time, and I called him right away. And he said, "Yeah, can you come in next Tuesday and interview?" And I said, "Well, sure." It's not a problem. And I came in, interviewed, met some people in the public relations staff, met I remember meeting Coach Steele and Coach Mott, and the next thing I know is I get home and I'm offered the job, and I start the next Monday. So within 10 days time, I went from being at home and unemployed to being a sports information director at DePauw.
So coming up on 40 years.
Right.
That being SID must be unbelievably relaxing and therapeutic, because you're like the Dick Clark of college athletics. You do not look a bit different than when I first met you back in the late 80s. What's your secret?
Well, the key is to start off with not much hair, and then it doesn't look like you're losing it a lot. So
that's a great point.
I thank you. I don't always view myself that way. I mean, I think one thing about being on a college campus is there's just all the activity that goes on, just it automatically makes you feel younger. I think, you're always around college students, and the mixture changes. A graduating class leaves, a new class comes in, and so you're always dealing and working with the people who are the same age, but you're getting a year older, chronologically.
Right.
But a lot of times I don't feel that. It's I mean, I think that's the biggest part of it. You're around, fresh ideas and questions, and things don't get old. They don't get tired and bored, and that's probably the big key.
That's a great point. So looking over 40 years, and one of the things that I think people love about sports is the emotional arc you go on from unbelievable highs to, just gut wrenching lows. In 4 decades, you've seen it all. What is the first thing that comes to mind when I say, hey, the lowest moment you shared at DePauw, whether it was watching an athlete struggle or a team, or what was that? What's the first thing that pops in your head when I say, what's the lowest athletic moment you were a part of at DePauw?
Well, I think it were the times where we had deaths, either current student athletes or people who were just graduated, and you feel it's there's nothing to describe that. I think if you if it's when people are that young and they lose their lives, it's because you're here and you can see the hope that they have when they come to school, and you can see that they're either, if they've graduated, they're starting to pave their way and their path and move on, and it's really sad, and especially with people you've established relationships with, and that for me is I think the more obvious one. Now, a lot of wins and some losses when you talk about athletic competition. So I think I've been pretty good in my professional side about not taking things too seriously. I think early on I did. I'm sure I did. One thing that's always been important is try to stay here, because the one thing that we always were taught early in our careers in sports information is, like, you don't cheerlead in the press box, and you're working an event, and you've got to be fair for both teams, or all the competition that's there. And so I think that kind of sets the tone for how you handle things and how you deal with things. And some days there's going to be bad news, and some days there's things are going to happen, and you just have to stay the course and try to keep your emotions in check, or not. I mean, sometimes that's why we have colleagues and we can share things with. But I've always felt like the winning and losing I've been able to keep in perspective. Maybe sometimes with the winning, I maybe got a little more excited, but.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's look at the other side of that arc. So what are some of those moments, whether it was watching, you mentioned the relationship side of things. I think that's one of the benefits of small school, is that, you're not just writing about these kids, but you get to see them, you get to meet them, you get to talk to them. So when we start looking at the other side of this arc, and those big high moments, whether it's an individual accomplishment in a game, or a team accomplishment, or even a coach accomplishment, what is that thing that pops into your head first and saying, hey, this is a moment I'll never forget?
Well, I that's really hard for me to answer, but sometimes I have to group them together. Sometimes it'll be like the Monon Bell game. It'll be, a class that's gone 3 years and hasn't won the bell, and the seniors get out there and they get it done, and just to see the excitement and how hard they've worked, and how hard the coaches have worked, and how much the school and the community's behind them. I mean, those things are great. I've been fortunate to cover 2 national championship teams in women's basketball, and then a men's basketball team that went to the championship game and lost by a point. I mean, when you talk about low points, that's one of those where in the moment you're just in awe that you're representing a place that's in the national championship game. And so it takes a while for things to soak in that you didn't win it, I think. But to be part of that, and then to still have relationships with those individuals, and I mean, the players on that team are a special group. The national championship teams for women's basketball are a special group. I love it when they come back. And then, sometimes memories can happen on a Wednesday night, and it could be, just a soccer game where maybe a win happens that nobody thought was going to happen, or, there's a walk-off in a baseball or softball game, and just things in the moment that are really great. There's a lot of those. I think overall, just the ability of our coaches and student athletes to represent themselves well in competition, and then for the most part win, and those are going to be the general memories. But as Coach Fenlon would say, it's a relationship business. And there's no doubt that those things become the most important things.
Yeah. So when you look at 4 decades, and you talked about the thought at one point was pro ball, another thought was SEC. Through 40 years, I'm sure there were times that you felt like maybe I need to try something else, or maybe somebody came to you and approached you about a position. Was the moment that you were kind of on that edge of staying and going, and what are the things that kept you at DePauw?
Well, there were I did have a couple of offers along the way, and the luster of the Division One kind of that just kind of went away. And I don't know that because it comes with a lot of pitfalls. And I saw a lot of my friends who were moving from job to job to job, and that's something that never appealed to me. And as for some people, that's exactly the kind of transition they want. And that I don't think I don't think I had that moment where I said, I'm staying for sure. It just stayed because it's always felt comfortable.
Yeah. Are there a couple things that you can point to that are the reasons why it's comfortable?
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts with it started for me with the the job, what I'm doing, and then it moved on to who I'm writing stories about, who I'm doing stats on, getting to know student athletes, and then it's the coaches. I think you establish these relationships. First it becomes a job, but then if you don't have those relationships, then it is just a job. And I had a really we've had a long stretch of coaches who maybe a little bit younger than I am who have stayed for a long time. And so you kind of grow up, continue to grow up in the business at the same time. You see their families, their kids grow up and things like that. And I mean, I've just always felt that people here did things the right way. When it comes to athletics, we absolutely represent ourselves the way that I think you should. And that's the biggest thing. I think if you're in a place that doesn't share the values that you have, then I think it's maybe an easier decision to just get up and go. But I just know that when we would take the field, get in the pool, take the court, it was going to be we were competitive, very successful, but we understood where the perspective is on everything.
Well, you mentioned your kids, and I see a picture behind you. Either you've gotten better at drawing, or that's one of your kids' pictures. Tell me what it's like as a dad to have your kids grow up on campus. You talk about the character at DePauw. You talk about the relationship business. You talk about some of the longevity of coaches, some really good people that are there that are influencing your kids, not just as coaches, but then also the students that come through. As I've seen your kids at games. They're everywhere on campus, and so they've lived the ups and downs. They've lived the heartache and the joy, and they've seen the values and the coaches teaching those values. What has it meant to you to be able to have this environment to raise your kids in?
Well, it's the impact has been immeasurable. It's I mean, I think it started early, and they were probably, I don't remember their age. Maybe they were first grade, kindergarten. And I remember them coming to a basketball game when we're playing Wabash. And, that environment can be just a little wild. But the game went 3 overtimes, and it was, the score was in the 150s or something. And maybe not that much. Luke Latner had 55 points. It was something that I had never seen before. And I'm thinking, they got to see it. And so I think that event kind of spurred more of them wanting to come around. And and then they take on some responsibilities here. They've been floor sweepers. They've been ball people at soccer and football games. But I think, as you were mentioning, the biggest part of it is just to be on a college campus and to see the role models that people are. and starting with our coaches and and then the student athletes, and then they've gotten to know some student athletes, and it's really rewarding for me to see that. And it's it's uh it's so much better to be at a sporting event than a lot of the other things that you can be doing, and which are um but I'm just I'm proud of them, and I'm proud of the way that when they get to campus now, they're not running around the gym, that they're actually, they pay attention once in a while and take on some responsibility from time to time when there are positions available, um, and then get to share in some of those memories that I've had. I think it was probably 2019. They were at the Monon Bell game, and just to be on the field with them afterwards and getting a picture and seeing them ring the bell, that was pretty neat.
Yeah. So with you having a life in sports, and that being your job, what's it like now as a dad going to watch your kids play? How do you disconnect, or do you keep stats, and are you writing articles about them? And
Well, one thing the carryover is I'm pretty quiet at games. There is no, and part of that's just from my job. Part of it's from my observations of
right,
you all as coaches and parents and student athletes who've come through DePauw, and kind of setting examples of what I think is acceptable, not acceptable behavior. So I mean, I'm pretty quiet. I just kind of soak in the moment. I mean, it's just so it's one thing that's really neat is when as they start coming, they'll come home after a practice and they'll be talking about something, and it'll immediately, I can relate it to something that a coach has told me about a situation that happened with one of their teams. And so I think the perspective that I'm able to have when it comes to things like that is, I'm so grateful for that, because it it really brings in the lessons of what sports teaches you, and and I hope that they view it as a, maybe a better way to handle situations. It could be, how do you build relationships with people? How do you, anything that comes up, how to handle conflict.
that's
I
good.
it's just and I'm so fortunate because I have the first door in the office, and so I I have a lot of people who will come in and talk to me, and I enjoy that. I probably learn more about coaching from that than I do from observing, from just watching
Yeah,
a game, and uh, and the ability to transfer that on to our kids it's invaluable.
yeah. Interesting. That's a great perspective on that. So at the age they're at right now, can they process? Do they understand you being in the Hall of Fame, what that means, the magnitude of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, they're proud, I think. Um, but I'm also the kind of person who doesn't, I mean, I knew I had to tell Shelly because she was going to find out, but I just, it's not something I talk about a lot. So, I'm sure they,
You didn't come home in a fur coat with a crown on.
oh, well, that, yeah, no, yeah, I think from the fact that they have been around here, I think they kind of understand it. It's hard at that, they're 15. It's kind of hard to understand some of these things. But I think they hang out in the Hall of Fame room a lot of times, and so they're familiar. And I tell them about the history of DePauw, and I tell them about some of the great people who were here, and so yeah, I mean, I think to some extent I'm sure they're proud. I just I'm sure they're happy for me.
Well, that's awesome. I can tell you, from somebody who's known you for almost 4 decades, I was so thrilled to see your name on this. I'm so honored to have been a friend, a coworker with you, and I couldn't be happier for you. Congratulations on being inducted into the class of 2025 into the DePauw Athletic Hall.
Well, Brad, it's been my pleasure to work with you, and I've always considered you the most interesting man in the world, and to be part of this and to have you conduct this interview is really means a lot to me, and I'm really appreciative to everybody out there who's supported me through my time here. And I look forward to being able to reflect on some of this some more.
You're the best, bro. Take care.
Thanks, Brad.